Have you ever felt completely drained after being with certain people? Or despite getting enough sleep, you still feel tired? Perhaps you've noticed a constant feeling of emptiness, of not being yourself. These aren't mere coincidences. They're signals your psyche is sending, screaming that something fundamental needs to change in your life. Carl Jung, one of the most brilliant thinkers in modern psychology, warned us about this phenomenon. He saw it clearly. Many of us live ignoring emotional exhaustion until our body and mind completely collapse, and all because we don't know how to identify the signs or set necessary boundaries. Today we'll delve into Jung's wisdom to understand how to recognize these signs of exhaustion, and most importantly, how to establish the boundaries that will save your emotional well-being. Because as Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Think for a moment. When was the last time you asked yourself if you're living the life you truly want? Not the one others expect from you, not the one that seems right to others, but the one that truly resonates with your soul. Jung left us a teaching that few have the courage to follow: the importance of choosing yourself, even when everything around you pushes you in another direction. The modern world is designed to distract you, to keep you trapped in routines, expectations, and endless commitments that seem inevitable. But here's the truth few dare to face. Every time you choose others over yourself, you're telling your inner self that you don't matter enough. You're ignoring that silent voice that, from the depths of your unconscious, tries to guide you toward a more authentic and fulfilling life. Jung emphasized that our connection with the unconscious isn't optional. It's an essential part of who we are. However, we often ignore its signals because facing them can be uncomfortable. That feeling of discomfort you experience when something isn't right in your life isn't coincidental. It's your soul speaking to you, showing you there's something you need to change, even though you fear doing so. According to Jung, there are 5 clear signs indicating you're experiencing emotional exhaustion and urgently need to establish boundaries. The first sign is chronic fatigue that doesn't improve with physical rest. When your exhaustion is emotional, no matter how many hours you sleep, you'll continue feeling empty. Jung described this phenomenon as a drainage of psychic libido, where your vital energy is being consumed by relationships and situations that don't nourish your true self. Have you felt this way lately? As if carrying an invisible weight that sinks you deeper and deeper. This isn't normal tiredness. It's your psyche telling you that you're investing your energy in the wrong places. The second sign is unexplained irritability. When small things that didn't bother you before now trigger disproportionate reactions, you're experiencing what Jung called the emerging shadow. Your unconscious is trying to communicate that you've repressed your needs for too long, and now that contained energy is seeking outlets, often destructive ones. Third sign, disconnection from your emotions. If you find yourself feeling numb, as if observing your life from the outside, you're experiencing what Jung called dissociation. It's a psychological defense mechanism that appears when emotional pain is too intense to process consciously. Your mind literally disconnects to protect you. Fourth sign, loss of enthusiasm for activities that once passionate you. Jung described it as a crisis of meaning. When you continuously postpone your dreams and needs to satisfy others' expectations, your connection with your vital purpose weakens. The result is a sense of existential emptiness that no external achievement can fill. The fifth and perhaps most concerning sign is the deterioration of your physical health. Jung was a pioneer in understanding the psychosomatic connection, explaining how unresolved emotional conflicts eventually manifest in the body. Frequent headaches, digestive problems, chronic muscle tension, all can be physical manifestations of violated emotional boundaries. Do you recognize any of these signs in your life? If so, you're not alone. Jung observed this pattern in countless patients who came to his practice after ignoring these signs for too long. But why do we find it so difficult to set boundaries? Jung had a profound explanation for this. According to him, many of us develop what he called a persona, a social mask we create to be accepted. This mask often includes being compliant, always available, and prioritizing others' needs. The problem arises when this mask becomes so habitual that we forget who we really are beneath it. We begin to believe that our value depends exclusively on how much we can give to others, regardless of the personal cost. Jung warned about the danger of completely identifying with this mask. The more we identify with the persona, the further we move away from our true self. And it's precisely this distancing that generates the emotional exhaustion we're discussing. Think about the decisions you've made lately. How many of them truly came from a place of authenticity? And how many were driven by fear, by the need to meet others' expectations, or simply by not wanting to make others uncomfortable? Jung invites us to reflect on this, because he knows that decisions that don't come from your inner truth only create more chaos and disconnection in your life. Choosing yourself doesn't mean rejecting others. It's not about living in a state of selfishness, but recognizing that to give your best, you first need to be at peace with yourself. This is the fundamental principle of self-love, a concept Jung explored deeply. Self-love isn't a luxury or an excuse to avoid responsibilities. It's the foundation from which all meaningful and authentic relationships can flourish. When you choose to prioritize yourself, something changes deeply in your energy. You begin to attract people and situations that are aligned with your essence. It's as if the universe responds to your decision to live in truth, eliminating everything that doesn't serve you and bringing what you truly need to grow. But to get there, you must first face your shadows, those parts of yourself you've ignored, repressed, or feared. Jung spoke of the shadow as that aspect of our psyche that contains everything we prefer not to see about ourselves. And although it can be uncomfortable to face it, it's in that confrontation where change really begins. Because when you integrate your shadows, when you stop fighting against them and learn to accept them, you discover an inner power you never imagined you had. This integration process doesn't happen overnight. It requires courage, patience, and an unwavering will to know yourself. But what you gain in return is invaluable. You gain clarity, purpose, and an inner peace that no one can take away from you. You gain the ability to say no when something doesn't resonate with you, without fear of what others might think. And above all, you gain the freedom to be who you truly are. Perhaps you wonder how to begin this path of establishing healthy boundaries. Jung offered us a practical method that begins with conscious self-observation. He said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." The first step is to identify your own needs, desires, and fundamental values. What really matters to you? What energizes you and what drains you? Jung suggested keeping a journal of dreams and reflections, as he considered our dreams to be direct messages from the unconscious that can reveal truths our conscious mind prefers to ignore. Once you've identified your genuine needs, the second step is to recognize where your current boundaries are being violated. This requires brutal honesty with yourself. In which relationships do you constantly feel exhausted? What situations generate that feeling of discomfort in the pit of your stomach? Jung taught us that the body never lies, even though the mind is expert at rationalizations. The third step, and perhaps the most difficult, is to begin communicating those boundaries. This is where many stop because they fear the consequences. They fear being rejected, judged, or abandoned. But Jung had a different perspective on this fear. What you deny submits you. What you accept transforms you. In other words, the fear you avoid facing has power over you, while the fear you accept and go through becomes your strength. Jung also taught us that the way we establish boundaries matters. It's not about building impenetrable walls or completely distancing ourselves from others. It's about creating what he called permeable and flexible frontiers, boundaries that protect our integrity but allow for authentic connections. One of the hardest things we do in life is listen to our intuition, especially when it leads us in a direction that challenges what we've built. Maybe it's a relationship you know no longer works, a job that consumes you without purpose, or even a dream you've pursued only because it seemed right. Jung reminds us that ignoring these signals isn't an act of strength, but a denial of our true essence. Choosing yourself means having the courage to let go of what no longer resonates with you. This isn't always easy. Often we cling to the familiar because change scares us. We convince ourselves that the devil we know is better than risking the unknown. But Jung challenges us to see change as a door, not an end. A door to a more authentic version of ourselves. Think about it. What are you holding onto in your life that no longer serves you? What relationships, beliefs, or habits have you maintained out of fear of letting go? Perhaps you feel that letting go of certain people or situations would be a loss. But the real loss occurs when you sacrifice your inner peace to maintain something that no longer makes sense. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's an act of love and respect for who you are. Sometimes the people with the greatest difficulty setting boundaries are precisely those Jung described as highly sensitive or empathic. If you identify with these characteristics, you probably have an innate ability to perceive others' emotions, sometimes even before identifying your own. This sensitivity is a gift, but it can also become your greatest vulnerability if you don't learn to protect your energy. Jung observed that these sensitive people often develop what he called a savior complex, an unconscious belief that their value depends on how much they can help, heal, or rescue others. This pattern can lead you to unbalanced relationships where you constantly give while the other person only takes, creating a cycle of exhaustion that seems impossible to break. If this sounds familiar, Jung offers a revolutionary perspective. Your true responsibility isn't to save others, but to individuate your own being. Individuation, a central concept in Jungian psychology, is the process of becoming the unique person you're meant to be, integrating both your conscious and unconscious aspects. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are, Jung said. And this means recognizing that you can't be everything to everyone, that your emotional resources are finite and precious, that every time you say yes when you really want to say no, you're betraying your inner truth. Jung also emphasized that setting boundaries isn't a selfish act, but an act of psychological integrity. He observed that when we constantly violate our own boundaries to please others, we're creating an internal division that eventually takes a toll. The psychic energy that should be available for our creativity, joy, and growth is wasted in maintaining this artificial division. Denied energy doesn't disappear, it manifests in distorted forms, Jung warned. This explains why many people who never establish healthy boundaries eventually experience seemingly inexplicable emotional outbursts or develop passive-aggressive behaviors that damage their relationships. When you finally choose yourself, something magical happens. You begin to see clearly what was previously clouded. People who truly support you stay, while those who drained your energy disappear. This isn't coincidence, it's a reflection of an internal change. Jung called it synchronicity, that connection between your inner and outer worlds that aligns everything when you decide to live in coherence with your truth. But this process also requires you to be honest with yourself. Sometimes choosing yourself means admitting that you've made decisions that don't reflect who you really are. Perhaps you've allowed certain people to cross your boundaries, or you've said yes to things you knew you should reject. This isn't a reason to judge yourself, but an opportunity to learn, recalibrate, and choose again. Jung believed that authenticity isn't a state you achieve once and for all. It's a continuous journey, a process of learning and growth. And on that path, you'll face resistance. There will be moments when you doubt yourself, when you'll be tempted to return to old patterns just because they're comfortable. But in those moments, remember that true growth occurs outside your comfort zone. The world won't always understand your decision to choose yourself. There will be those who criticize you, who question your choices, and even those who distance themselves because you no longer fit their expectations. This can be painful, but it's also liberating. Because when you choose yourself, you stop seeking external validation. You understand that your worth doesn't depend on what others think of you, but on what you think of yourself. This doesn't mean you should live isolated or disconnected from others. On the contrary, When you choose yourself, your relationships transform. You no longer seek approval, but connection. You no longer settle for superficial relationships, but seek bonds that nourish your soul. And in the process, you discover that the right people will always be by your side, not because they need you, but because they value you as you are. Jung taught us a fascinating paradox. The more authentic you are, establishing clear boundaries and honoring your needs, the more deeply you can connect with others. The meeting of two personalities, he said, is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But this transformation is only possible when both people present themselves in their truth, not in their mask. The most nourishing relationships in your life will be those where you don't have to diminish yourself to be accepted, where your boundaries are respected and your needs are as important as the others. Jung called these individuated relationships, connections where both people mutually support each other on their personal growth path without merging or losing themselves in the other. When you begin to live from your authenticity, the world around you changes. This isn't magic or a trick, it's the profound connection between your inner and outer worlds. Jung spoke about how our psyche projects externally everything we carry within. If you live in conflict with yourself, you'll attract conflicts. If you reject yourself, you'll attract rejection. But if you choose yourself, if you accept yourself as you are, you'll begin to notice how circumstances and people around you also change. This transformation doesn't happen immediately. It's a process, and like any process, it requires patience and commitment. There will be days when you'll feel like you're going backward, moments when your old habits will try to return. But this is where the true test lies, in your ability to stay firm in your decision to choose yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's lonely. Protecting your energy isn't a selfish act, it's an act of self-love. Jung believed that the unconscious is always working to guide us toward our well-being, but we often ignore its signals. That feeling of exhaustion you experience after interacting with certain people isn't coincidental. It's your unconscious telling you that relationship isn't aligned with your essence. And if you decide to ignore that signal, the cost will always be your inner peace. Choosing yourself implies establishing boundaries, and boundaries aren't walls to keep people out, but bridges that allow for more authentic and healthy relationships. When you say no to what doesn't serve you, you're saying yes to your truth, your dreams, and your well-being. This doesn't mean you should cut ties with everyone, but that you need to be honest with yourself about which relationships nourish you and which drain you. As you begin to live from this authenticity, something wonderful happens. Your intuition becomes stronger. That inner voice that previously seemed weak or confused begins to guide you with more clarity. You begin to make decisions that not only make logical sense, but also feel right in the depths of your being. This is the power of choosing yourself. It reconnects you with your intuition, with that internal compass that has always been there, waiting for you to trust it. Intuition, as Jung explained, is one of the purest forms of connection with the unconscious. It's that feeling you have when something simply feels right or doesn't feel right. But to hear it, you need to silence the external noise. This means stopping the search for others' approval, disconnecting from social expectations, and learning to trust yourself. Because at the end of the day, no one else can know what's best for you. When you decide to choose yourself, you're sending a clear message to the universe. I'm ready to live from my truth. And the universe responds. You begin to attract people, opportunities, and experiences that are aligned with who you truly are. This doesn't mean everything will be perfect or that you won't face challenges, but those challenges won't feel like a constant struggle. Instead, there'll be opportunities to grow and strengthen yourself. When you decide to live from your authenticity, you also begin to experience something Carl Jung described as synchronicity. These seemingly casual events that perfectly fit into your life are a manifestation of your internal alignment. When you choose yourself and decide to honor your truth, the universe seems to conspire in your favor. The right opportunities arrive, the right people appear, and everything begins to flow in a way that previously seemed unattainable. But this doesn't mean the path is free of obstacles. In fact, often, the greatest challenges arise just when you decide to choose yourself. It's as if the world, accustomed to the compliant version of you, tries to test your commitment to this new path. This is where your power lies, because each time you reaffirm your decision, each time you choose your inner peace over external demands, you're strengthening that connection with your true self. The key is to remain firm, even when doubts appear. It's normal to feel fear when leaving behind the familiar, even if you know it no longer serves you. But remember this: every time you choose to stay in a place that doesn't make you happy, you're closing the door to something that could transform you. Jung taught us that change doesn't occur without resistance, but that resistance isn't a sign that you're wrong, but that you're moving forward. One of the most powerful ways to overcome that resistance is to reflect on what you truly value. What's most important to you? What kind of life do you want to build? When you have clarity in your values and goals, it becomes easier to make decisions that are aligned with them. And in doing so, you begin to attract people and situations that share that same energy. It's important to remember that you're not alone on this journey. Although choosing yourself may seem like a solitary act at first, you're actually building a path that will attract the right people. Those who support you, who celebrate you, and who are willing to walk with you. These people don't need you to change to fit into their lives. They accept you as you are because they've also chosen to live from their truth. When you reach this point, something within you changes forever. Life no longer feels like a constant struggle. Decisions that previously seemed impossible are now made with clarity and confidence. And most importantly, you find a sense of peace that doesn't depend on external factors. Because, as Jung taught us, true peace can only come from within. That inner peace is the result of honoring your needs, respecting your boundaries, and living in coherence with your values. But it's also a gift you can share with the world. When you live from your authenticity, you inspire others to do the same. Your courage becomes a beacon for those seeking their own path. And in this process, you not only transform your life, but also impact those around you in a profound and meaningful way. Jung offered us practical techniques for establishing effective boundaries that I want to share with you now. First, the conscious pause. Before automatically responding yes to any request, take a moment to consult with your body and emotions. How does this request really feel in your system? Is there tension, heaviness, or resistance? These are valuable messages from your inner wisdom. Second, the technique of the compassionate no. Jung understood that many fear saying no because we associate it with being unpleasant. He suggested practicing saying no with kindness but firmness. "No, I can't attend, but I appreciate you thinking of me" is a perfect example that maintains connection while establishing a clear boundary. Third, what Jung called energetic separation rituals. If you work in emotionally demanding environments or regularly interact with people who drain your energy, create a conscious ritual to disconnect from that energy when you finish. It can be as simple as washing your hands, imagining the water carrying away all energy that doesn't belong to you. Finally, Jung emphasized the importance of regular and voluntary solitude. He himself dedicated time every day to solitary reflection and considered it essential to maintain a clear connection with his inner truth. "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens," he said. "The greatest gift you can give yourself is to be yourself. Not the version of you others expect, nor the one you've created to fit in, but your purest essence, the one that exists when no one is watching." Carl Jung showed us that the true work of life isn't in searching outside, but in unraveling the mystery we carry within. And when you finally choose yourself, you realize that everything you were seeking was always within you. This is a call to action. Life is too brief to live trapped in others' approval, to ignore your own needs and dreams. Today is the day to take the first step, to face your shadows, listen to your intuition, and reconnect with your true self. Because when you choose yourself, you not only transform yourself, but also the world around you. What now? This is the moment to reflect on what you've heard. Ask yourself, what aspects of my life are draining my energy? Where do I need to establish clearer boundaries? Remember that every small step counts, and you're not alone on this journey. This space, this channel, is here to remind you of your potential and to guide you on your path toward a more authentic and fulfilling life, free from the emotional exhaustion that occurs when we ignore the signals from our psyche. If this message resonated with you, make its impact go beyond. Share this video with someone who needs it, someone who is struggling with emotional exhaustion or having difficulties establishing healthy boundaries. Every interaction, every comment, every like helps these profound teachings of Jung reach more people who need them. Imagine the collective change we could generate together, a community of individuals committed to honoring their own needs and living from their authenticity. Let me know in the comments what sign of emotional exhaustion you've been experiencing or what boundary you plan to establish after watching this video. Your experience isn't only valuable to me, but it might be exactly what someone else needs to read to take the first step on their own journey. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss more content about deep psychology, personal growth, and the transformative teachings of Carl Jung and other great masters. Remember Jung's words, be what you are, not what the world wants you to be. Your path toward a life free from emotional exhaustion begins with that simple but powerful act of choosing yourself. And that moment can begin right now. Thank you for being here, for listening, and above all, for having the courage to look within. I'll see you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring the depths of the human psyche and the path toward a more conscious and fulfilling life.